What's going on, my Cake Talk family? How have you been? Before we get into anything, I want to say happy March. My birthday was this month and Air Max Day is coming up. So what else should we do but cover one of the greatest Air Maxes in history? That's right, we're going to talk about the Air Max 90 today. So it's your boy Tripple Rich. I'm back like a repeat customer. So let's go! Before we get into the technicals and all the nitty gritty, let's talk about some fun facts on the shoe that maybe you did or you didn't know. Did you know that the original name for the Air Max 90 was actually the Air Max 3? Huh, you didn't know that? Well, now you do. Did you know that the Infrared 90, the famous infrared colorway that we've all come to love, was actually not the original color of the shoe, and the name infrared didn't show up until 15 years after the shoe came out? I bet you didn't. Let's break down the design history. The legend himself, Tinker Hatfield, as you might have guessed, designed this legendary shoe. When the shoe first came out in 1990, it was actually called the Air Max 3. And the way they got this name was the original Air Max 1, which made huge waves internationally, was followed up by what they at that time called the Air Max 2. The Air Max 2 is what we now know as the Air Max Lite, and the follow-up to that shoe is the shoe we're talking about today, the Air Max 3, aka the Air Max 90. There isn't too much cultural design, as you might know Tinker to do with his designs. This shoe was just outright supposed to be a better version, a better follow-up of the original Air Max 1. And a lot of people would argue that they were able to do just that. This shoe just added extra lines, extra details, and put extra emphasis on the parts of the shoe that they wanted you to look at. As opposed to the Air Max 1, this Air Max 90 made colors in the parts of the tech that were new. So in this case, the air bubble, they brought all the colors to this corner to give attention to that detail. They also put what I like to call a license plate, or most people call the back plate, which was also supposed to give some added support, as well as these plastic pieces right here next to the eye stays. They were also supposed to give some extra support. So it was just a part of Nike's design language to show you the bright spots that were very important. Now that we've talked about the design, let's talk about the infrared controversy, as I like to call it. This was the original colorway. Kind of those gray and black tones, the white midsole, and that bright reddish orange to pop. Now the fun part is, it wasn't called infrared when the shoe first came out. When the shoe first came out, it was called hot red. Some people have called it Hyvant red. I've also seen it was called Hyvant orange. So we don't really know. There's also other names, but Hyvant red, Hyvant orange, hot orange, and don't let me forget radiant red. Those are the four looming names that we believe Nike first called this great fluorescent bright color. Now, we would not see the infrared colorway again from the 1990 release until 12 or 13 years later. In 2002, there was an Aussie exclusive that came out, Australia, that came out, and the colorway that Nike called it was MX Orange. After that, the year following, Asia and Europe got an Air Max 90 exclusive, and that was the first time we saw it called infrared. Okay? Now, still at that point, I wouldn't say the name infrared had just caught on. It wasn't until 2 years later. 2 years later, we get to 2005, and Nike unveils what they call the History of Air Pack. Sneakerheads at home know it as short HOA. When this shoe made it into that grail status of History of Air, I think that elevated the folklore and the story of the Air Max 90. And during that release, they named it Infrared on the box. This release was also the first time America had got an infrared release since the 1990 drop. And honestly, the shoe just took off. People fell back in love with it. And I would say that's where the legend of the Infrared 90 started. Since then, we've seen a couple different releases of the infrared 90. I believe '05, '09, 10, 12, 15, 18, 20, and most recently 22. It's a color that I hope they will always keep in the vault because it never gets old. I personally have had over 7 pairs of just this infrared 90 alone. So I know I'm not crazy because I know you got fans out there. The most recent pair I had, I actually just donated. So now that we've covered some of the controversy behind the infrared colorway and some of the design history, let's talk about the Nike Air Max 90's famous pop culture moments. The first thing I want to lead with is, did you know that the President of the United States had a custom pair of Air Max 90s? Yeah, George W. Bush, the OG, not the junior, the OG, he had a pair and the custom said Air Prez on it. It was mind-blowing to find this out, but yeah, he used to jog in these Air Max 90s. It was one of his favorite pairs, so that's a huge pop culture moment. Another pop culture moment that we can't avoid is the popularity of the shoe in London. This became a staple in the London rave culture in the 90s, and it was beloved because you could really knock the shoe around and it would continue living. Love for its sturdiness and comfortability, it was just a great shoe to party in all night. More recently, a huge collab was with Off-White. Rest in peace, Virgil Abloh. When he did the Off-White 10 collection, the Air Max 90 was one of those. And he first did it in like an off-white translucent color to match the vibe of the 10 pack that he originally released. Because that release was met with such fanfare and it sold out immediately, he came back and continued collaborating with Nike. After that 10-pack, he released the Air Max 90 2 more times. My favorite one is the one that followed the first one. He did an all black with a white suede check. Beautiful color. And then following that, he did like a Desert Army tan. What's special about the Air Max 90 is that from the original release up until today, this is known as one of Nike's most successful models. And it said that this was probably Nike's first ever international smash hit. America, Australia, Europe, as well as Asia, they all fell in love with the shoe and the hype was real all over the place at the same time. So I would like to say this was probably one of the catalysts for Nike to become a global household name. So let's talk about the current state of the Air Max 90. Since it came out in 1990, the shoe has been loved by many, and it's not just this amazing infrared colorway. The Air Max 90s come out in almost, I want to say, millions of colorways, and they've almost all been met with great reception. As we talked about in the past segment, there have been some amazing collabs, but outside of that, just general release colors have done pretty well. And as you can understand, with Nike expanding from what they were to who they are now, it's still a funny stat to know that they sell more pairs of the Air Max 90 today than they did in 1990. So I think the shoe's still relevant. I think it's still beautiful. I think it's still ahead of its time, honestly, and I can only expect more colors to come out constantly, and they do pretty well with the colors on Air Max 90, so look for good news to continue to come. Now that we've reached the end of the video, it's the best time, my favorite time, where I get to tell you my personal opinion on the shoe. I love Air Max 90s, and honestly, as I was putting this video together, I actually didn't realize how much I love them. My first ever pair of shoes that I paid for with my hard-earned money when I got my first job at 16 was a pair of Air Max 90s. I got a pair of Air Max 90s on Nike ID. All my OGs remember that when they used to send the ID sneakers back a lot quicker than they do now. But I made a Air Max 90 on Nike ID, and I made every color on the shoe. I made every panel on the shoe a different color. Bright rainbow shoe, and I put Fly Rich on the side. I still have these shoes at my parents' house. Let me see if I can find a picture. They're obnoxious, but they're amazing. And, you know, it didn't really hit me until doing this that I was like, dang, like, that was the first shoe I ever got. As well as I dropped this gem earlier, I've had infrared 90s. This colorway, I've probably had about 7 pairs. Now, the thing is, with the older pairs, some of the paint cracks. And I think they really did address that in this 2020 version. But I've had the 05 version, the 09 version, the 2010 version. The list goes on. And I've really worn this shoe into the ground because it goes great with almost every outfit. So, big fan of the shoe. If you have never bought an Air Max 90 before and you want to try it, my best advice is to go half a size up. Especially for those wide foot brethren out there, I'd say try a full size up. The reason I say that is there's a lot of padding on the toe and the ankle collar, which is great. But as many Nikes are, they can be a bit slim. That'd be my word of advice. But it's a very sturdy, comfortable shoe that you can wear on end once you get the right size. It's Kick Talk. I think this is like volume 21. So I'm proud of me. I'm proud of you. I'm going to keep getting better on myself. I know you're going to keep getting better too. So until next time, it's Kick Talk.